Good day. This is Dave Workman of Workman Associates, and today's our podcast. With me, I have Andrew Stephenson of Michael and Stephenson, located here in Logansport. And Andrew is going to be speaking with us today about elder law. Let me ask him just a few questions here. Andrew, how long have you been practicing law?
I started practicing in the fall of 2011, so almost
okay.
7 years.
All right. Have you been here in Logansport all that time?
Yes. After I passed the bar in the summer of 2011, I joined my dad's practice with him.
I see.
So I've been there ever since.
Excellent, excellent. Now, where did you go to school?
I graduated from Logansport in 2004.
Okay.
Then I went to IU.
I see.
Graduated in 2008.
Okay.
And then I went to the University of Dayton for law school.
I see.
Graduated May of 2011.
Excellent. Well, I tell you what, the reason I'm having Andrew here is because I'd seen some of his work. I've worked with his dad, and I've worked with him on occasion. And so I think it's important that we realize that attorneys can't do everything well. And one thing I noticed that Andrew was working on and spoke to him a little bit about was elder law. And while you can't see Andrew, you could probably tell by his introduction that he's a young man. But I was curious, why did you decide to go into the particular area of elder law? And I know that you're not exclusive to elder law, but it seems like that's one area that you really enjoy.
Right. I started my practice primarily doing estate planning. That's what our office had been doing since I think the late 50s when Mr. Michael was practicing privately, and then my dad joined him in the late 70s, and then that's primarily what Dad's been doing since then, with a little bit of elder law mixed in. As my practice has grown, I've been getting more and more calls from families dealing with nursing home issues, long-term care. Been getting calls from the nursing homes themselves. And so I realized that there was a need in this community for an attorney who knew the rules and could advise clients on what to expect when they are starting to either consider a parent or maybe a grandparent moving into a facility, what they should expect, and then what kind of planning we can do to help make that transition as easy as possible.
That's great. It's interesting to say that because obviously the demographics of Logansport and Cass County lend themselves. My mom was in a nursing home for 10 years, Dad 4 years, assisted living and long-term care. But for example, I just drove by Miller's Mary Manor a couple of days ago where Mom was at, and they're putting on this huge addition.
Right.
And so I think that is a very needed area, and I know it's a needed area. So what if you had to, in our brokerage firm we call it elevator speech, 30 seconds, how can you do, what is elder law?
I guess my definition of elder law would be looking at our clients' needs as they age, and identifying problems or potential problems and finding solutions to those problems.
Excellent. I think that's a very good one, because unfortunately, like when people come in here to our office and they'll say, Dave, I think I'd like to take out some long-term care insurance. Nobody wakes up thinking that. And it's never a good day to think about dying or long-term care insurance.
Right.
And generally, it's precipitated by some event at the doctor's office that's going to disqualify them. They've just been, now in the doctor's charts is dementia or Alzheimer or rheumatoid arthritis or something that's going to disqualify them from getting some sort of insurance that will help offset the expenses. And so listening to Andrew, I think that's excellent piece of advice that they're trying to do it proactively versus reactively.
Right. When I meet with a middle-aged couple, say somebody in their late 40s, 50s, early 60s, I like to have the conversation. Usually this is an estate planning only meeting, or at least that's what they think it's going to be. So we'll talk about what kind of assets they have, all that kind of stuff, and what they want to happen upon their deaths. But then I also like to say, okay, now what are our health situations? Have you given any thought to long-term care insurance? Have you looked into it, priced it? Is there any planning that we can do now to help either protect assets for when care is needed in the future, or can we start to put a plan in place for when the time comes and when it's actually needed?
You know, it's interesting. I had, to make sure that this was an efficient use of Andrew's time, I had typed out some questions that I was going to ask him, and he actually led into this next question. What questions do you ask your clients or prospective clients in regard to Medicaid or long-term care planning? But what you're saying is that you do bring that up in the course of estate planning, when they might be coming in for a will or revocable living trust. But now you take it one step further and say, okay, these are, you know, these are the possibilities, the real possibilities. I heard just the other day that couples over 65 now have a 70% chance of needing some sort of care, not necessarily nursing home care, but assisted living, home care, or long-term care.
Right. And I guess when we're doing estate planning, I think it's important to see the family dynamics, the whole picture of the client's financial situation, their health situation, the family situation, so we can put together an appropriate estate plan. If somebody thinks they're coming in to just get a will, I like to dig a little deeper and say, okay, you want your children to receive, you know, your property upon your death. Do your children have any issues? Do we need to look at putting things into a trust, or maybe special needs trust might be appropriate? Some extra planning instead of just doing it superficially and then running into more problems once those assets are passed down.
You know, it's interesting, Andrew. Obviously, that you're the next generation from your father, and when your dad and I started out, long-term care insurance was this really snake oil kind of coverage, potentially, because they had so many fine. There was so much in the fine print that said you had to spend like 3 days in the hospital, and if you didn't do that, then you're not going to pay. Or a lot of other caveats that really didn't allow the person to take their benefits.
Right.
And I've seen over the last 30 years really a much better product that comes out, and it's interesting that you as an individual in the legal profession are actually talking about that to people because it gives them an objective opinion. Obviously, if I talk about long-term care insurance, I'm going to be paid for that if they buy it.
Right.
Whereas you're saying, look, this is something to consider in regards to your estate plan.
Right, and I think there's a very real benefit for long-term care insurance if the clients can afford it.
Correct.
There are insurance policies that are called partnership plans, where if the policy's value reaches a certain level, after the policy's done paying out, then they could automatically qualify for Medicaid benefits regardless of what their income or assets are.
Correct.
So that's one planning strategy where you can, if you have significant assets that you want to protect, if you can swing one of these long-term care insurance policies, there's your Medicaid plan right there.
Right.
And we don't need to do much on top of that.
And it's interesting because I tell folks that it's their health that buys the insurance, not their premiums. Because once you are told you have a certain problem that's going to disqualify you from these insurance companies, then it doesn't matter how much you want to pay on these long-term care policies. And really, there's been a real change in that. And when I started, there were 10 different companies, big players. Now there's about 5. And the insurance companies have gotten away from unlimited coverage, which they used to have. Now there's traditional. Now there's life insurance products that are UL. And then now there's variable annuity products. And so there's really now a bigger selection from which to choose. But it's something that I never wrote a policy prior to 55. Now that's becoming more and more the sweet spot because of the pricing and everything. People have to think of that in the future. You gave me a sheet. Andrew has a program actually that it looks like you've done at different facilities. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. Several times, different agencies in the community have put together a program called Know Us Before You Need Us. I think that's going to happen again toward the end of this summer. The tentative date is August 1st. And I've got that on my calendar to speak there.
Where would that be held?
I'm not sure. It's been in different locations in the past.
Okay, but they could call your office.
Right.
They could call your office and find that out, Michael and Stephenson.
Right. Once the plans are finalized, I'm sure it'll be in the Ferris Tribune and Cass County Online and all those regular news outlets.
Okay.
So.
You know, and this isn't just for folks you mentioned at the beginning of the program, this isn't just for folks in their 60s or so. This is for maybe young people who are looking ahead for their parents or even their grandparents. And to me, it's especially appropriate for when you're talking about individuals in the farming community, so that the farm isn't put at risk of having to be sold at an inopportune time to
Right.
start paying for the expenses.
Right. Well, and I am a recent father. I have a 14-month-old.
Oh, I didn't realize it. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so my wife and I got married in April of 2016. One of the first things we did after we got married was set up our own wills and powers of attorney, living wills, because I think it's important, even for young people, to have a plan in place. You never know when you're going to have an accident and not be able to take care of your own self. So you need to have those things in place, even as young people, but definitely, planning for middle-aged parents, grandparents. It's conversations that need to have now before the need arises. I think that's the best way to put it.
Because that's a great way to put it, because not only do you have these financial burdens, but now there's a real emotional thing going on. I mean, it's hard, and you'll find this as a parent. It's hard to ever make a great decision when you're emotional. I mean, sure. I look back at some of my worst parenting, and it's always when I was blowing my top. And it's the same thing with when all of a sudden we think, Dad had a fall, and now he's got to go into the facility. What do we do now? And if you have a plan prior to that, it's a whole lot easier, because as I said, the emotions of it. Now Mom is at home, Dad's somewhere else, the kids are, you just want to have this in place.
Right.
You have been around long enough. I hadn't realized you practiced that long, by the way.
Yep.
What abuses do you see in the area of Medicaid planning? And maybe you can go in with your definition of what Medicaid planning is.
Well, yeah, so to start off, Medicaid planning is the process to get a person eligible for Medicaid benefits, usually with the goal of helping to pay for skilled nursing facility, the fees. For different skilled nursing facilities, you're looking at $7,000, $7,500 a month. So that's a significant cost. But the planning is, how are we going to get from ineligible to eligible? And so the rules are different depending on whether we have a person who is married or a single person or a married couple who are both in a facility. But we look at the asset limits, and if they're over the asset limits, we figure out how we're going to get rid of the extra assets, whether that's converting countable assets to an income source, which would then be exempt, or sometimes we just do a spend down plan and say, this is the amount of money we need to get to. Once you reach that amount, then we'll do a Medicaid application and you should be eligible. So it depends on the situation, what the applicant's own estate and assets consist of. But that's generally what a plan does, is go from ineligible to eligible.
And this can't happen overnight. Like if people have $300,000-$400,000 and they want to give it to their kids or grandkids or whatever, isn't there what's called a look back provision that for like 5 years that, hey, like if you divest yourself of these assets, they're still going to be counted on your med. And we're not. Right. The other thing is that, do you find that people confuse Medicare and Medicaid when they're talking about this type of planning?
I think people confuse the names.
Yeah.
Most people are aware there is a program that is health insurance for people over 65, and then there's a separate program that helps people who can't afford insurance at all pay for their health care.
Right.
But yeah, I'll get Medicare and Medicaid, those names switched up all day long when I'm talking with clients.
Exactly. Well, I agree, and that just is part of the process of, and it's hard to learn this on the run, meaning that if you're trying to explain some of these rather intricate things, while there's this emotional burden going on, it makes it much, much, much harder than if you're just, sitting down with Mom and Dad, both healthy, and, the kids are there to help them, maybe interpret some of the things that are going on, and then they go make an informed decision. It's just a much better process.
Sure.
what have you while you've been in the practice of law in this area for a number of years, have you seen any consequences of those who have not adequately planned for long-term care?
Yeah. Well, and this kind of relates back to you asked me about abuses. And we see elder people being taken advantage of at times. But as far as issues specifically related to Medicaid planning, we see improper gifts done where people aren't aware of the 5-year look-back period. So maybe mom thought, well, I can just give my assets away and then I'm broke and
Right.
then I'm
No,
eligible
exactly.
for Medicaid. And then sometimes we have to undo that or try to undo it. Other issues would be in a couple situation. We don't have a set asset limit. It's not $2,000 or $3,000 if one spouse is in a facility and one spouse is at home. So there's a calculation we have to do to figure out what level of assets they're allowed to have and qualify. If you don't know how to do that calculation, then you could end up spending down way more money than you actually needed to be eligible for Medicaid.
Right, if there's a spouse at home.
Right.
If there's a spouse at home. I tell you, folks, I deal with a lot of attorneys, both here, and we're licensed in 30 states. And I think Logansport not only has a great number of attorneys that have been practicing, but I've been very impressed with the guys like Andrew and younger attorneys that have come back into town and are working in either their father's practices, if they've come back in and of themselves. And we joke. We joke about attorneys all the time. Maybe you haven't heard that, Andrew.
No, never.
But it is so important. And he said something that was very important. If you're 20 years old and you have a child, you need a will. I mean, you need some sort of way to make sure that those. We got to kind of sort of put on our big boy and big girl pants at some point. Where does the life insurance go? Who's going to take care if there's we never think we're going to end up on page 2, but we're never not. And whether it's going to be when we're 25 or 105, only the good Lord knows. So I think that was an excellent point, even though it wasn't about elder care per se, just about general estate planning. Well, before we end up, Andrew, I had this question. What are 1 or 2 statistics about long-term care that you think would surprise the average person who is thinking about planning for long-term care?
You mentioned the 70% number, the likelihood that any given person is going to need some form of long-term care during their lifetime, whether that's in-home care or assisted living or full skilled nursing facility level of care. I think a lot of people are aware that a lot of people need it, but I don't think many people know it's that high. And as our population continues to age, I think that number is only going to go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other number that I have heard was that 60% of people are likely to have some kind of disability where they're going to miss a considerable period of work or need a skilled nursing facility or something like that.
That's interesting.
And
That's really interesting.
that 60% number relates back to not only the estate planning, but also having a power of attorney in place to help you make your financial, take care of your business, and help make healthcare decisions in the event that you're unable to do it. And I think that's maybe an underappreciated aspect of what an estate planning or elder law attorney can help with, is making sure that if that disability does happen, you have the documents in place to have somebody who can help you either make those healthcare decisions or help take care of paying the bills and all that kind of business-related stuff.
Well, one saying that I had heard, and I think it goes directly to that, was what used to kill you now disables you. What used to kill people in the hospital now disables them, so they're able to live on, but the quality of life may not be great, and it might be quite expensive. You had mentioned $7,500. My mom was at Miller's, and for the last 3 years, it was $9,200 a month. here in town. And now she had 24/7 care, bedridden, everything, you know. And but and fortunately we had long-term care insurance, and there were some other things that we had done, and so. But we were private pay. So I really think this is a topic, you know, is it, you know, do you want to listen to this on the July 4th while you're shooting off fireworks and the kids are in the pool? Probably not, you know, but it's just one of those facts of life that part of the aspects of our wonderful medical care is that there is prolonged life, but sometimes the quality of life isn't as great, ergo, therefore, we have to prepare for that and the expenses of that. So, and before we shut off, is there anything else you'd like to just say? I appreciate you coming in and kind of actually bringing some light to my eyes about this planning process.
I don't think of anything else. Thanks for having me. I like to get in front of people and talk about this because I do think the more people who hear the message of planning and being prepared, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
Absolutely.
And hopefully some people hear this and give it some thought. You don't necessarily have to call me to help you, but do talk to somebody, and it'll be worth the time, I think.
Well, you know, and that's very magnanimous of you because we do have a number of good attorneys out there, and so if you have any questions that you'd like to run through us, please feel free to do so. You can look for Andrew under Michaels and Stephenson under the attorneys, and there's plenty of, as I said, plenty of good ones. And Andrew, as I said, was magnanimous in the fact that you know you need to do it. You need to do it. So, Andrew, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you around town, and actually, I'll look forward to seeing when you present on August 1st if I can be there.
Okay.
Talk to you a little later.